Good evening, everyone. I'm Martin Gosden. I'm the co-chair of the South Wales and West of England branch, and welcome to yet another one of our branch webinar events. Tonight, we are very pleased to welcome back Dr. David Hillson. He's done several presentations for us over the years, and it's brilliant to have him back on board again. And as you all know, David is sort of globally known as the risk doctor, and he'll see you now if you want to sort of line up and have a chat with him later on. Valuation sheets, please do let us know what you will think of tonight's presentation. It's absolutely essential that we are listen to your feedback. So please give us that feedback, what you like, what you didn't like, and particularly about ideas and events for the future as well, so we can arrange those for you. Please look at the chat function on the sort of control panel and submit any questions you have via that. And then Rob Allen will kindly put those to David at the end of the presentation in the Q&A session. So please do that. Thank you. Bit about APM information, usual stuff. There's no physical events now until at least September, and I suspect that'll probably gradually run on a little bit until we sort of start building our momentum up before we can start doing physical events again. And so we'll see how that works out as time progresses. Meantime, we'll continue with the sort of evening webinars and lunchtime webinars and various other virtual events as well. There's a lot of excellent resources on the APM website if you haven't found them already. They include the sort of APM learning, which has a huge number of sort of e-learning modules, which are really, really good value to go and have a look at. You'll learn an awful lot about those. And also about some sort of resources to help you develop your sort of knowledge and knowledge and skills. There's a discussion forum as well, the APM Hub, so get involved in that and engage with it. There's lots of excellent sort of help and guidance on becoming a chartered project professional as well. Lots of webinars and lots of guidance documentation available on the website. Please do look at that. Branch events coming up, got quite a few sort of planned. 6th of July, which is next week, is how digital innovation maximises project delivery. We've got a number of speakers from McDonald who'll be sharing their experience of actually doing that. 14th of July, we've got Babcock Nuclear Project Management Capability Transformation. We've got several speakers from Babcock Nuclear talking about what they've been doing to upgrade their sort of project management capability. So that'll be very interesting sort of a talk from them. 28th of July, some of you may have been looking out for the asset management event. We unfortunately are having to reschedule that. We have problems with our speakers availability, so that'll be sometime this autumn, we hope now. 8th of September, so we missed now sort of the holiday season. No matter where you're going, either abroad or not, or sort of certainly in this country. But we kick off again on the 8th of September, and we've got the Torbay Health Authority and their response to COVID. We have Alan McCoy, who'll be talking about that and some real lessons, I think, from project management on how that's gone. The 7th of October, we have another one of our virtual networking events, so please do get involved in that. Then on the 12th and 13th of October, we have our Southwest Project Management Conference, which is a virtual conference over 2 half days this time, looking at the project team of the future. So please do get involved. It's free for members, and so we've got a really excellent lineup of speakers already sort of sorted out for that. We're looking forward to hosting more webinar events as we go forward, and physical events once we're able and you feel more capable and more happy to do that. It'd be nice to get back to buffets and actually proper networking for once. Yeah, good stuff. Right, without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. David Hillson, widely known around the world as the risk doctor. David leads the risk doctor consultancy and provides worldwide sort of consultancy services across the globe. Today we will discuss the importance of thinking and how to develop a mature risk mindset. It's all very good having the tools, processes and techniques and everything else. You need to have to apply them, and this is what this evening's presentation is about. So David, without further ado, over to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Martin, thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. It's great to be with you. I'd rather be in Bristol and be able to see you and bump elbows or whatever we're allowed to do, but this is the second best. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, and I hope you'll have an enjoyable session. So thank you very much for the invitation, Martin, and APM, to talk about this really important subject, developing a mature risk mindset. I've been involved in risk management for more than 35 years. I guess it was somewhere about 1984, 83, somewhere around there, where I first discovered risk management. And the thing that keeps me going with risk management is that it's always new, it's always developing, and I find that really, really challenging, finding new ways of applying risk management, but also new challenges in making it work better in practice. And so I'd like to share with you some things that I think are really important that will improve the effectiveness of how you manage risk on your projects and programs, and maybe even more widely in your life more generally, because as we all know, risk management is a life skill. I've been involved in risk management for a long time, and a lot of people have been doing risk management for as long as I have, and in some cases even longer. And we basically know what we're doing, don't we? We understand the basics. We've got all the support bits and pieces in place in terms of tools and techniques and consultancies and so on. So everything's fine, isn't it? And we know that risk management is supposed to help us achieve our project goals, and all our projects are successful, aren't they? Because we manage all the risks. Well, you're probably having a little wry smile or a chuckle and saying, ha ha, David, if only. And I know that's true. But actually, if you look at this old Standish chaos data, this is the most recent data that I have, which goes up to 2015. I don't think they publish it publicly after this date. But here we have the data on how many projects succeed and fail and are challenged. And you'll see that really it's not great news, is it? That at best, 30%, maybe a third of projects succeed, a fifth outright fail, and up to half of all our projects are challenged in that they fail to meet at least one of our project objectives. And we're still there. But risk management is supposed to help us. Risk management is supposed to make our projects more successful, not less successful. We're supposed to be improving with time. And this data from the Standish Group goes back to 1995. I mean, this is 25 years of data where we really don't seem to be improving. Risk management is supposed to drive project and business success because it gives us a way of managing the inherent risk in our projects and in our business. It makes that explicit. It focuses us on the objectives that we're trying to achieve and gives us a proactive way of actually dealing with the things that could affect us, giving us thinking time, space to manage, and making sure that we focus on the right things. So everything ought to be okay if we do risk management properly, but somehow our projects and our businesses continue to fail or at least be challenged. So what's going wrong? When I first started in risk management all those years ago, I was a process person. I focused pretty much on these things, and a lot of people still do, on techniques and tools and training. And these things are all important. We do need to know what we're doing and have techniques for identifying and assessing and responding to risks. And these techniques need supporting with good, robust tools that help us to do the job well. And we need to train people in how to use those tools and techniques. So clearly these three T's are important, but they're not sufficient. There's something missing. And that's the thing I want to focus on this evening, the thing that's missing in addition to techniques, tools, and training. And of course, we do need those things. But I think the missing thing is a fourth T. It's the T that starts with thinking. And thinking about risk is really important. And I'd like to explain why. It's a very simple solution, a kind of an ABC solution. Thinking is important because the way we think affects what we do. Attitudes affect action, beliefs shape behavior, and culture influences conduct. I guess I could have tried to go on with D's and E's and F's, but I thought at least the first three were enough to be going on with. We know that how we think affects how we act. And risk management is supposed to manage risk, but how we think about risk will determine how we try to manage it. If we have a concept of risk which is limited, then our management of risk will also be limited. And if we have blinkers or blindfolds on so that we only see part of risk, the way we think about it is not complete or correct, then it's perhaps not surprising that our management of risk is partial and not as effective as it could have been. So I'd like to suggest to you this evening 6 areas in which the way we think about risk might be limited and making our risk management less effective than it could be. So let me ask you a question. When you hear the word risk, what do you think of? And you might like to think you can put something in the chat box if you like, or you can just shout at the screen. What words come to mind when you hear the word risk or maybe risk management? And the words I hear very often are these things: that risk is a load of trouble, it's problems, it's risk management is a waste of time, it makes you worry about things that will never happen. Sometimes the risk guys like me are called the business prevention department because we're always saying, oh, you can't do that, oh, you need to be careful, oh, you better not, just in case. And risk management is just adding cost with no real benefit. And if you think like that, it's not surprising that you don't put all your heart and energy and effort into risk management. You just kind of tick the box and get on with it as quickly as possible so you can get back to the real job of managing the project, delivering deliverables, and doing the thing that you do. But maybe that's not the right way to think about risk as all of those sorts of things. There's a different way to think about risk. And the best practice view of thinking about risk is along these sorts of terms. Risk management is helping you to understand, to know the things that you don't currently know, so that you can do the things that you're not currently doing. It's an early warning system that gives you time to respond instead of reacting when things blow up in your face. It's not business prevention, it's business enabling, because it helps you to take the right risks safely through intentional managed risk taking. And seen properly, risk management is not an additional cost, it's an investment. It's spending now to save later. And if you think like that, you could see that your behavior towards risk management will be very different. If you think that risk management is a waste of time and it's unnecessary and it's preventing you doing the things you need to do, you'll have one set of behaviors. Whereas if you think that risk management is exposing the things that you need to know that you don't currently know, to help you to do the things you need to do that you're not currently doing, of course, you'll invest your time and effort in it. So you'll see how the different kind of thinking will influence the different kind of behavior. And as I say, I'd like to suggest to you something which I call the risk mindset, a set of values and beliefs which affect the way that we manage risk, the way that we approach risk management in our projects and our businesses, and more widely in our lives. And I believe this is a more mature way of thinking about risk, which leads to a more effective behavior. So I said 6 core values and beliefs, and I'll just tell you what they are now, and then we'll just explore each of them in a little bit more detail as we go through the rest of this part of the presentation. And I should say that these slides are going to be available to you after the event through the chapter website and the APM website. So here are my 6 core values and beliefs about risk. Risk is natural, risk is manageable, risk matters, not all risk is bad, my risk is my responsibility, and proactivity is essential. So we'll just explore each of those in turn, and I'd like you to challenge your own thinking. When we get to each one of these, just ask yourself, do I think about risk like this? And if not, what behavior does that encourage? What behavior does that promote? So let's start with the first thing. Risk is natural. We've all heard of the VUCA acronym: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And wherever we look in the world, and this picture of the car and the question marks, I love this picture because it just says, whatever you're trying to do, there are going to be questions that rain down on you from all around and just prevent you making the progress that you think you want to make. But risk is natural. When we look into the natural world, we find uncertainty. If you look at the climate, the weather, what on earth is the weather supposed to be doing here on the 1st of July, the middle of summer? It's pelting with rain outside my window. And then this morning it was really hot and I burnt my nose. What's going on? Risk is part of our natural environment, part of the climate. You think about health, the pandemic, with all sorts of different ways that the world is evolving. You look at well, all sorts of things. I mean, you can find your own examples if you look around the world. Risk is a perfectly natural phenomenon. It's part of the natural environment that we live in. If we think that risk is unnatural, it's something that shouldn't really be there, it's something which doesn't belong in this lovely, beautiful, ordered world of ours, we'll have a certain sort of behavior towards it. We'll resist it. We'll think, I shouldn't be having risk on my projects or in my business or in my life. I should be fighting against this. Somehow I should be seeking this world of perfect order and perfection and harmony, which actually isn't the real world. We need to see that risk is natural. It's just part of the world that we live in, and that includes the world of projects. So for a second key value, risk is manageable. A lot of people, when they find risk occurring in their projects, adopt a victim mentality. This shouldn't be happening to me. I'm a professional project manager. I'm a project controls manager. I'm a program manager. I'm a good person. Risk shouldn't happen to me. This isn't fair. I ought to be able to have a risk-free life or a risk-free project. And if you have a victim mentality, then you tend to protect yourself. You tend to feel bad when risks happen. You'd maybe even feel ashamed talking about risks on your projects, instead of seeing it as something natural, as we've seen, and something that isn't making you a victim. It's not a bad thing to have risk on your project, but also it's not that risk happens to you. It's not that risk is something which impinges on you from outside and you're a victim of your circumstances. Instead, we can see that risk is manageable. We can do something about risk. We can move from victim to victor, if you like, and actually see that there are ways of addressing risk. There are perfectly good techniques to avoid, transfer, mitigate or reduce or accept bad risks. There are ways of exploiting and sharing and enhancing and accepting good risks. We can do something about these things to make sure that the impact on our projects is not bad but is good. And so what we ought to be doing is choosing to engage with risk and to manage it, instead of saying, you know, we shouldn't be having this. Somehow, when it happens to me, there's nothing I can do about it. I just have to roll with the punches and make the best of it that I can. So the belief, the value that risk is manageable will encourage a kind of proactive, engaged behavior rather than a withdrawn victim kind of behavior. And we can choose how we behave. Let's intentionally see that risk can be and should be and must be managed on our projects. Now, my third core value is that risk matters. Risk is really important. If you don't believe this, then you'll leave risk management to some junior person, some risk a risk champion, or maybe it'll be something you give to the project controls people, or some junior person on your project. If you see that risk really matters, then maybe you might take it seriously. Let me explain to you why risk matters with a very simple equation or an illustration. And it's to ask you this question: is risk the same as uncertainty? Now, I guess you know the answer is no. Risk is not the same as uncertainty, because all risks are uncertain, but not all uncertainties are risks. There are billions of uncertainties in the universe, in the world, in our project environment, but we don't write them all down and put them in our risk register. We don't think about them and engage with them and talk about them and try and manage them. Most of the uncertainties in the world don't matter. Risk is a subset of uncertainty, and the subset, I filter the world of uncertainty using three simple words. Risk is uncertainty that matters, because most of the uncertainties in the world don't matter. Why don't they matter? Because on our projects, we define what matters through our objectives. And the only uncertainties we need to engage with, we need to understand and prioritize and respond to and write down and communicate, the only uncertainties that matter are the ones that, if they happened, would affect our objectives. If an uncertainty that turned out to really happen doesn't affect our objectives, who cares? It just doesn't matter. Is it going to rain in Kazakhstan next week? I don't know. I don't care. It doesn't affect me in any way at all. Is the technical manager on your project going to be off sick for a week? I don't know, but I don't care. It's your project. It's not my project. If my technical manager is going to be off sick for a week, actually, I need to know about that, because that affects my objectives. So an uncertainty that can affect our objectives is a risk. An uncertainty that can't affect my objectives, I don't care about. And that means that by definition, all risks matter, because all risks are uncertainties that, if they occur, would affect one or more of our objectives. And indeed, that's how we define risk. The ISO 31000 standard says that risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. Or the APM Pram Guide, or the APM Body of Knowledge, says that a project risk is an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or negative effect on one or more project objectives. Lots of words. I think I prefer effective uncertainty on objectives. That's easier to remember. But the point is that risk matters because risk is defined in terms of our objectives, and the objectives capture what matters on our projects. So by definition, risk matters. Now, if you don't believe that, if you think that risk doesn't matter, risk is one of those things that will never happen, it's worrying about things that don't, that are so improbable they're never going to occur. If you think that it's just pie in the sky, it's just worrying about nothing, you won't engage with it, you won't do risk management seriously. But if you believe and understand that risk matters by definition, then you will put some time and effort and energy into it, because that's something that could affect achievement of your objectives. And if there's one thing that project managers are really passionate about, or we should be, that's achieving our objectives. So let's just think a little bit more about this idea of risk mattering with the fourth of our core beliefs in the risk mindset, that not all risk is bad. And let me illustrate that with this picture that I've used for a long, long time, and most of my presentations, not all of them, but a lot of them. This funny little picture of a mouse that I found on the internet years ago. The mouse is like us as project managers. He needs to manage risk in order to succeed. And here he is facing an uncertain situation. And like a good project manager, the mouse has spotted the trap. All our projects are full of traps, things that could waste time and damage reputation and destroy value, cost more money. So the little mouse, being a good project manager, is going very carefully. He's put his helmet on so that he won't be killed or injured. Excellent. And what we need to do in our projects is find the things that will hurt our projects and protect ourselves and go very carefully. But there's another uncertainty that matters for the mouse in the picture. And it's not just the trap. The trap does matter. He doesn't want to be killed or injured. But the other uncertainty that really matters to him is the piece of cheese. Can he get the cheese off the trap? It's not certain. What he needs to do is to make sure that he not only doesn't spring the trap, but he does get the cheese. And that's the real challenge for us in managing our projects. We have to not spring the trap, but we have to also get the cheese. So we know what the traps are. Traps are things that waste time, waste money, damage value, destroy performance, all of those bad things. What's the cheese? Cheese means benefits. Cheese means value. Cheese means products and services that people want and need. It's the things we want to get out of our project. And they're not certain. We don't know for sure that we can create value through our projects. That's why we do project management. And so the good project manager, like the good mouse here, needs to manage two types of uncertainty at the same time. Don't do things that will damage the project, of course, but also get the value out, and to do both at the same time. If the mouse doesn't spring the trap and he's not injured, but he doesn't get the cheese, he's failed. And if we don't get any value out of our projects, we failed. But if the mouse gets the cheese off, but in doing it, he springs the trap and he's injured, he's failed. And the same is true with our projects. We might deliver our deliverables, but be so late that they're no good to anybody, or so over cost that we never make any profit or value. So we need to do both of these things. And what this tells us is that the concept of risk doesn't only include bad things. Sure, there are uncertainties that if they occur would have a bad effect on achieving our objectives. They would make us wasting time or wasting money and destroying value. But there are uncertainties that matter because if they occurred, they would have a good effect on achieving objectives, help us to work faster, smarter, cheaper. And what we need to do as risk managers, as project managers, as people, is to make sure we minimize the bad things and maximize the good things. And that's what risk management is supposed to do. Now, you can see that this concept, this belief, this part of the risk mindset will have a huge impact on the way that you manage risk on your projects. If you believe that all risk is bad, the only risks that matter are the ones that are threats that could damage the performance of your project, then all of your risk management will be about protection. It'll be about avoidance. It'll be about minimizing. It'll be about trying to make sure that none of those things actually happen on your project. And that's true that we all need to be doing those things, but you're missing half of the uncertainties that matter. If you understand and believe that there are good risks as well as bad risks, upside as well as downside, opportunities as well as threats, then you'll not only be spending time protecting yourself against the bad things, but you'll also be on the lookout for potential good things, uncertainties that matter that could help you, and seeking to embrace those and capture them and exploit them and get the value out of them to benefit your project so you can work faster, smarter, cheaper. This will have a huge impact on the way you behave towards risk. It's a really important value or belief. So I'd encourage you, if there's, out of all of these six, this one I think is really, really important. I mean, they all are. So what's the fifth one? The fifth one is to say that my risk is my responsibility. And a lot of people think that somebody else will manage risk for them. I mean, that's why we have a risk manager, isn't it? Risk manager manages risk. I guess about 20 years ago, a friend of mine wrote an article called Kill the Risk Manager. Actually, it was in APM's Project magazine that we used to have all those years ago. And in his article, he said the concept of risk manager is really unhelpful because we get the idea that the risk manager will manage the risk for us. And that's absolutely not the case, that we all need to be taking responsibility for managing our own risks. Why would you say that? Well, if we understand that risk is uncertainty that affects objectives, if I have objectives that I'm responsible for in the project, and we all do, the project manager, even if you're a team member or somebody as part of a project, you'll have objectives that you have to deliver. If you own objectives, then uncertainties that affect your objectives are your risks. So a risk is an uncertainty that affects objectives. An uncertainty that affects my objectives is something I need to know about. It's my risk. And if it's my risk, I need to manage it. So what we need to recognize is that for each of us who have some objective in the project, and that's everybody, that because risk is uncertainty that affects my objectives, I have to take responsibility for managing them. And this affects all of us. We manage risk at different levels in the project because we have different levels of objectives, but we need to recognize that nobody else is going to manage the risk that's going to affect my objectives. Because they're my objectives, I have to take responsibility for them. And of course, I might ask somebody else to help me in that. Maybe I can't deal with it all myself, and I engage other people as action managers or people who are going to deal with the risk and help me along. But my risk is my responsibility. Which leads me to and I should just say that if you don't believe this, then you'll leave risk to somebody else to manage for you. And because they don't own the objectives, they won't really care as much about whether or not the risk is managed well or not well. If you have your own objectives, you'll care about whether or not those things are achieved, and you will care about uncertainties that could affect them. So you're the best possible person to manage those risks. So don't pass them off to somebody else. And then finally, my sixth of the sixth mindset characteristics is the importance of being proactive. Risk management is a forward-looking radar. It scans the future. It says, what's out there coming in my direction? What could I see that's some way off? It's not very well defined. It's a bit kind of fuzzy out there, but I can see there's something big coming in my direction. It's big and it's bad and it's moving fast. It looks like it's going to hit me full on. I've seen it with enough time to be able to do something about it. I can put some barriers in the way, or I can move out of the way so it passes me by, or I can try and protect myself and minimize the impact if I really can't move out of the way. So we get this early warning that we see things coming. It allows us to be proactive, to think about what we're going to do in advance. And it's not just about the big bad things. We might see some big golden glowing good thing developing over here, which if we don't do anything is just going to pass us by, and we'll lose all the benefits and the opportunities that might give us. And seeing it over there gives us the opportunity to steer our project towards it, to capture the benefits that uncertainty will offer when it arrives. So what we've got is this radar which is showing us what's developing in the future, giving us that opportunity to see it in enough time to do something about it. If you don't believe that proactivity is important, you'll just sit back and say, well, what will be will be. We'll just wait and see. We'll manage what comes when it comes. And then you'll get big bad things that will blow up in your face, and you'll have to suddenly react to them when perhaps you won't be ready. You won't have the resources that you need. You'll be panicking to move things around, and things that will be affected that perhaps you could have protected in advance. And then you'll have things that will flash past you, and you'll think, bother, if only I'd seen that in time, I could have perhaps done something with that and benefited my project, but I've missed it because I didn't bother looking for it in advance. Reactivity is not very helpful. I mean, we can't always do the best thing when suddenly we have to act now. So proactivity is really important, and it's a key value, a key belief in the risk mindset. Well, I've covered quite a lot of things in the last half hour. These are the 6 parts of the risk mindset, just to remind you. Risk is natural, manageable, and it matters. Not all risk is bad. My risk is my responsibility, and I need to be proactive in addressing it. Let me just finish off with a few final thoughts to explain how you can adopt this risk mindset if there's any part of it that your current thinking is not embodying. So this matters. Why does this matter? You remember we had the simple ABC. Attitudes affect action, beliefs shape behavior, culture influences conduct. How we think affects how we act. And if we have a blinded or a partial view of risk in any one of these 6 areas, our risk management will be less effective than it could be. There'll be something that because we have a limited concept of risk, there'll be some part of risk management which we're not embracing, which we're not getting the value from that it could offer to us. Instead, what we need to have is an accurate concept of risk, which will enable our risk management to be maximally effective, to make the best out of the risk management approach that we can. So it's really important that we think properly about risk so we can act effectively towards it. So let me suggest to you ways in which we can adopt each of these 6 elements of the risk mindset. Just some simple headline ideas for you. And if you like, we can explore some of these a little bit more in the questions, or maybe you'll just take them away and think about how you could implement this in your own project and your own setting. If we think that risk is natural, it's part of the natural world around us. It's not an unnatural, weird thing that shouldn't be happening. It's part of the world we live in. In a way, it's part of the beauty, the unpredictability, the unexpected. When you see that the rainbow suddenly appearing, oh look, isn't that nice? I wasn't expecting that. Isn't that lovely? Or when you suddenly have some challenge that you weren't expecting that you can engage with. Just accept that your project is risky. All projects are risky because they're unique and they're complex and they're based on assumptions and dependencies. All projects are risky. It's natural, not only in the world at large, but in your project in particular. So we need to accept it. We can't fight it. It's real. Deal with it. But risk is manageable. You can do something about it. You're not just a victim of these uncertain circumstances which happen to you. You can engage with them in advance. You can influence risk, even the risks that are outside of your control, risks that come from other people, from other parts of your supply chain, from your subcontractors or from your customers or from your competition or the marketplace or the regulators or the politicians or the health environment or the political environment. All of these things are outside our control. Oh, I'm just a victim. I can't do anything about it. Yes, you can. You can see where those uncertainties might affect you, understand your vulnerabilities and protect them in advance. Or where you see some of these things might be good, you can expose yourself to them and make sure that you take advantage of the things that are coming your way that are helpful. All risk is manageable in some way. There is no such thing as an unmanageable risk. So then we need to recognize that we're managing risk because it matters. Risk is uncertainty that could affect our objectives. And as project people, we need to focus relentlessly on our objectives. It's all about achieving the objectives. We're kind of monomaniacal. We're absolutely crazy about our objectives. And that's the thing that really matters. And because risk is uncertainty that affects objectives, risk really matters too. And so we don't want to see risk as some kind of sideshow, as some kind of optional extra, some box we have to tick because it's in the process somewhere. It really matters that we manage those uncertainties that could affect our objectives. In my view, risk is the thing that makes the difference between success and failure because of this reason. Because we plan to succeed and then things happen that weren't in the plan, and so we find that we're challenged in our projects, or maybe we even fail. The things that happen that we hadn't seen, that weren't in the plan, that could affect our objectives, most of those things are risks, or they were risks until they happened. And if we'd seen them in advance, we could have done something about them. So there's a direct one-to-one correlation, a perfect correlation between our ability to manage risk and our ability to deliver successful projects. If we can't manage risks, our projects will definitely fail, or at least be challenged. If we can manage risk, we give ourselves the best possible fighting chance of succeeding with our projects. And that's because not all risk is bad. Yes, there are things that we call them threats, uncertainties that could hurt us. We need to minimize them and protect ourselves against them, avoid them, transfer them to other people, minimize them. Of course, we have to do that. But don't forget the opportunities. Look for those things that can help you, that can make it easier for you to deliver your objectives, that will save time and save money and enhance benefits and performance. And we need to make sure that we stay alert to those things and don't discount them. We're actively looking for them and trying to capture them. And that means we need to take responsibility for the uncertainties that can affect our own objectives. Don't pass risk off to someone else. Don't make the risk manager manage risk. If I have objectives in the project, I have to manage my risks that can affect my objectives. Maybe I need help with that, but I still have to take responsibility. Own the risks that affect your part of the project and don't pass them off to someone else. And above all, be proactive. Don't just wait, oh, I can deal with that later. Maybe it'll never happen. Maybe I'll have some time next week. If you spot a risk that matters, do something about it while you can. You might not always have the chance to address it. So it's best to act now and be proactive. So I think there's a whole set of behaviors, of changes, of challenges that we pick up from these ideas in the risk mindset. And I hope you found some of those things as we've gone through. I hope you've been challenging yourself and saying, you know what, I don't really believe that all risk, that risk includes good things as well as bad things. Or do you know what, I do feel a bit of a victim with risks on my project and they just kind of happen to me. Well, if you spotted one of these things, then maybe you ought to start thinking about how you can change the way you think to improve your behavior towards risk. And I'd just like to give you 4 steps, 4 things that you might use to help you improve your risk mindset, the way you think about risk, and maybe become a little bit more mature in your thinking towards risk so you can become more effective in your behavior towards risk. So let me suggest as a first thing, you pick something. You pick one of these aspects which is challenging, where you know your thinking is not aligned with this kind of behavior or belief. And then you build a new habit. You train your mind to think differently. To say, I must remember, risk really matters. I need to take responsibility. Maybe you put post-it notes on the bathroom mirror or on the on your computer screen. I was going to put on, say, on your steering wheel of your car when you're driving to work, but most of us don't drive to work, do we, anymore? Anyway, use prompts, use reminders. Some people write things on the threshold over the door as they go into their working space. It reminds them every time they go through that threshold, they have to adopt a new mindset, a new way of thinking as they walk into the work environment. Train your mind and work on something until it becomes natural. Develop emotional intelligence where you're aware of your thinking and you check it. So you go, what's my behavior towards this uncertainty? Is it not following one of these 6 aspects of the risk mindset? Am I thinking in a way which is unhelpful, which is limiting my view of risk and my management of risk? And then actively, intentionally change your thinking using the techniques of emotional intelligence. And that's a bigger subject for another day. You might need some help. Maybe you want a coach or a mentor or a trusted friend. Maybe one of your senior managers has some time and experience that they can share with you. Or you have a peer, you have a colleague who you know is more mature in their thinking towards a particular aspect of risk management than you are. And maybe you can just get some help and chat things over with them and ask them to review your decisions and your behavior and see if they can help you to actually find a better way. And lastly, be intentional. I'm sure you're aware of the conscious competence cycle, where we start off being unconsciously incompetent. We don't know what we don't know. Then we learn that there's something missing. So we become consciously incompetent. Oh, there's something I don't know here. I need to learn about this. Then we train and we practice and we become consciously competent. We can do it if we think about it. But what we want to do is to move from conscious competence to unconscious competence, where we do it well without thinking about it. It becomes part of our mindset, part of those values and core beliefs about risk and risk management. So it's just naturally the way we manage risk. And that's my goal. That's what I would encourage you to aim for. To say, I've heard something tonight that I didn't really know that was wrong. Now I've understood that maybe there's a weakness in my way of thinking. I need to do something about that. Now I'm going to go away and start doing something until I know how to do it and then practice it until it just becomes natural. And I would ask you to think about ways of changing your behavior, changing your thinking that will lead you towards that. So my sort of overall 2-word summary to the whole thing is think risk. Don't just let risk happen to you or be part of your project. Risk management is too important for that. Risk is too important for that. And hopefully you'll see that these 6 aspects of the risk mindset will encourage a more mature, a more rounded way of thinking about risk, that will help you to practice risk management more effectively. Why do we want to do that? So that our projects will be more successful. That's what it's about, isn't it? Delivering products and services that people want and need, have delighted customers who can go away and make the world a better place. And so that's what we want to do, and risk management is the way to help us do that most effectively. Well, I hope you found some of those ideas useful and challenging, that you've got something you can go away and work on and tussle with. I'm very happy to help, of course, if I can. And I'm also very happy to take any questions that you might have, either now or if you want to, you can contact me. My contact details are here, but they're also on the internet, and also they'll be in the slides that we hand around. So I'm happy to take questions now or afterwards. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to hand back to Rob just to see if he's got anything that we can discuss just now. So thanks very much.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Thank you for taking the time to share additional information with us. I've had some lovely comments from those in the audience saying thank you. So I'm going to jump straight into the questions, if that's okay. So yeah, Catherine has asked, are these elements of the risk mindset affected by national culture?
Yeah, that's a great question, isn't it? Let me just pull up again I guess it's probably this slide, is it? No, I can't remember the number of the slide. Here we go. These 6 elements here. Are those culturally determined? Are there things in here which, if you were American or Australian or Chinese or African, that actually you would think differently about these things? I've deliberately chosen these 6 things to be culturally neutral. So some cultures would tend to view some of these things a bit more strongly, a bit more positively than others. But I've worked in 60 different countries, every continent except the Antarctic. I'm very interested in culture. And I've seen that some of the cultures lean one way or the other on some of these aspects. But generally, these are weaknesses in the way that people think globally about risk. So yes, there are kind of flavorings and nuances in different national cultures, but I still think that, you know, our American cousins and our Chinese friends and our African brothers all have challenges in each of these 6 areas, and we all need to improve the way we think about risk right around the world. Great question, though.
Excellent. Thank you, David, and I hope that helps Catherine. So Ashok has asked if you could elaborate and just confirm. So I'll read it out word for word, but Ashok has said, did you say you can have positive risks? Ashok always thought risk was negative, and the positive side is the opportunity, e.g. stock dealing, risk of price going down, but if it goes up, it's a great opportunity to sell and make profit. And he's just asked if you'd mind elaborating on that, please.
Did I really say that risk includes upside? I've got a whole book about it. The last but one book I wrote is called Capturing Upside Risk, Finding and Managing Opportunities in Projects. Yeah, I really said that, Ashok. And it's not just me. It's in the ISO standard. It's in the APM Body of Knowledge and PRAM guide. It's in the PMBOK guide from PMI. It's in Management of Risk, the MOR guide. It's really a global recognition that risk could be good for you as well as bad. If risk is uncertainty that matters, it could matter because if it happens, it's bad for you, and we need to know about those things. But risk is uncertainty that matters could also mean it matters because it could help you. If you've got something that might happen, and if it did happen, it would save you time and money, wouldn't you want to know about that? And wouldn't you want to have a proactive process that said, let's go and look for those things and try and maximize their probability and maximize their impact, and then take action to make sure they happen and help us, and we gain that extra time and extra money? Of course, we want to find those uncertainties that if they happen would be good for us, as well as finding those uncertainties that if they happen would be bad for us. So for something like 20 years, it first appeared in the PMI PMBOK guide in the year 2000, and then in the PRAM guide in 2004, from APM, and then in multiple guides, to say that risk is a double-sided concept. And so what we need to do, opportunity is just another flavor of risk. So risk has 2 types. Bad risks are called threats. Good risks are called opportunities. So threats and opportunities are 2 types of risk. And risk management manages threats and opportunities together in an integrated process. Risk management minimizes threats and maximizes opportunities. So yes, Ashok, I really did say that. I really did mean it. And a lot of people have been doing that for something like 20 years.
Excellent. Thank you, David and Ashok. I hope that helps. I can see a great positive comment, but I'm going to continue with the questions and come back to the comment in a moment. But Mandy has asked, to improve risk mindset, is there an order in which you should approach the 6 areas?
That's also a very good question. If you had completely a blank slate and you didn't know anything about risk, then I would do them in the order that I presented them, because it seemed to me that there was some logic there. You start with the idea that risk is out there in the big wide world, but you're not a victim of it. You can do something about it. And the reason you do something about it is because it matters. And it matters not only because it could be bad, but because it could be good. And therefore you need to do something about it. And the best way to do something is to be proactive. So I believe those 6 tell a kind of natural story. And if you knew nothing, you ought to start at the beginning and kind of work your way around. But actually, in reality, most of us have filled in some of the blanks. And so I would start where you are. If you spotted a hole in the idea of taking responsibility for risk, and you believe that the risk manager should manage risk and it's not for me to do, that's the area for you to start with. You start in your own area of challenge. But I do think they tell a story if you start with risk is natural. And on this diagram, you kind of go around clockwise. And that's the reason I presented them in that order. But start where you are. If your area of challenge is the last one, start there.
Excellent. Thank you, David. So Robert has asked, it's not from myself, there's another Robert in the room, has asked, any suggestions for finding hidden risks, the unknown unknowns?
Yes, and that's the whole challenge of risk management. I mean, known unknowns are the risks that are already in your list. Unknown unknowns are the risks that you could discover that you haven't yet found. So the whole purpose of risk identification is to uncover the unknowns that you don't currently know. Now, there are 2 types of unknown unknown. I know Donald Rumsfeld died today, sadly, at the age of 88, and it wasn't really him who said the known unknown thing first, but I think it was actually Confucius. But anyway, he's famous for the unknown known, all that stuff. I'd like to complicate it even more. The unknown unknowns, there are 2 types. There are unknown but knowable unknowns, and we need to find those. And there are unknown but unknowable unknowns. And those are the ones that we'll never find because they're inherently unknowable. And we call those black swans. Some people call them ontological uncertainties, but they're just posh, they're just showing off. So risk management, risk identification is about finding the unknown but knowable unknowns, the ones that we could know if we knew where to look. And the whole idea of risk identification is to turn over the stones, to turn the light on, to see where those uncertainties are that matter. And so what we have is, for example, we have 3 time frames for risk identification. We look back, we learn from experience, we look at post-project reviews, we have checklists that are based on things that happened in previous projects, and we ask ourselves, could this happen on my project? So we have a past-focused risk identification. Could something that happened before help me with my project now? Then we have a present-focused view of risk identification. What is there in my project? What is here in my technical specification, in my contract, in my business case? Where is the uncertainty here? What about the uncertainties in my project team? Do I have the skills that I need? The kind of personalities? Are we going to work together well? What have we got in our project schedule? Is everything achievable? So we have a present-centered focus for risk identification. And then we have a future focus in risk identification with brainstorming and with creativity techniques like appreciative inquiry or Delphi techniques or influence diagrams. These things where we explore the future, what might happen out there. So to expose those unknown unknowns, those hidden risks, we need to look back, what can we learn from the past? We need to look present, what's here in my project, and we need to look to the future, what's coming. And those kinds of sort of broad techniques, those categories of techniques, will help us to actually find more of the uncertainties that matter. And I use ABC, another type of ABC, to help me remember those 3 different kinds of techniques. Assumptions analysis is present focused. What are the assumptions in my project? Brainstorming is future focused. Let me think about the future and what might happen. And checklists are past focused. What happened before and could it happen again? So that kind of ABC triplet of techniques is a good way to start.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And Robert, I hope that helps. Ashok's just quickly jumped on when you mentioned black swan, and it said, is it possible to plan for black swan risks?
Yes. It's another talk. I'm happy to spend half an hour, 45 minutes talking to you about black swans. A black swan is something which is inconceivable until it happens. So the idea was that we knew for certain in the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th century, all swans are white. We know that for sure. If you see a bird that's the shape of a swan, but it's black, it can't possibly be a swan because all swans are white. And then in the 1700s, we went to Australia and we discovered these swan-shaped birds that were black. They can't be swans. We give them a different scientific name because they can't be swans by definition. Then we do the genetics a little bit later and discover they are swans. Inconceivable until it happened. What can you do to manage something which is inconceivable until it happens? Well, you can't manage it in advance, can you? Well, you can. What you do is you don't know what the thing is going to be, but so instead of managing the thing, you manage its potential impact. And this is what business continuity and disaster recovery and crisis management is all about. Something might happen which I can't imagine, because anything that I could imagine, I'm dealing with through risk management. But if something that I can't imagine does happen, and it means that, for example, half my staff can't get to work, or it means that my entire supply chain shuts down overnight, or it means that I have no electricity to communicate with, I can't imagine how that would happen. But if it did happen, this is what we do. And so we have that kind of business continuity planning. In projects, we would have project continuity planning. It's like business continuity, but in the world of projects. What do I need to do if some unexpected thing happens, a black swan lands, and then suddenly I find an impact on my project? So you plan for the effect instead of for the risk. And the other kind of generic way of responding to black swans is to build resilience into your projects so that whatever happens, whatever impacts you, you can bounce back. And certainly we've had that experience through the whole pandemic in the last 15, 16 months, being hit with something that we weren't expecting, although we should have been expecting it because, of course, the pandemic was entirely predictable and predicted, and that's another whole subject. But we've been learning how to be resilient, and hopefully we've learned some useful lessons that will help us in the future when something else happens that isn't a pandemic, but which is another different kind of black swan, which will affect us in ways that we can't imagine now.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And Ashok, I hope that helps with your question. I'm going to move on to Stuart's question, who talks about rating of risks is often subjective. We may underestimate risk. Are there any techniques for making our assessment of risk more accurate?
Yes, rating of risks is always subjective. You can't measure something that hasn't happened. And we don't know if it's going to happen or not. So we're making a judgment, we're making an estimation, we're making an assessment, we're not making a measurement. So you can't measure risk. You can only estimate or assess it. And probability is a view, you're taking a view of how likely something might be to occur. You're expressing your degree of confidence that it will happen or not. You're not measuring, this has a 53% chance of occurring. You're saying, it's about 50-50. I really don't know. Or I think it's really quite likely. I'll say kind of 70 to 90%. I'm not saying it's exactly 72 or 74, but it's kind of in that area. So it's necessarily always subjective, but that's a good thing because what we're doing is we're expressing our uncertainty. Risk is uncertain. We don't know. That's the whole point. And so what we're saying is, I'm going to tell you how uncertain I am. I think I know most of what's going on. It's just this little bit of, I'm not quite sure about this part, or do you know what? I really haven't got a clue. Anything could happen. Now, that's really important information to know. If you have some part of your project where you really have no idea what's going on, you better just recognize that, scope that, expose it, and do something about it. And so rating risks ought to be subjective. And then the other thing is, it shouldn't be subjective based on one person's opinion. risk management is a team effort, and not just the project team, but all our project stakeholders could and should be involved in different ways. And so what we're doing is we're gaining lots of different perspectives, lots of subjective views on what this risk actually might look like. And it's like, if you had there's a classic parable about an elephant, and six blind men look at the elephant, and somebody says it's a bit like a snake because they're holding the trunk, and someone says it's like a brick wall because they're feeling the side, and somebody says it's like a spear because they're feeling the tusk. And they all have different perspectives, and when they talk to each other, they build up a picture of what the elephant is. If we have stakeholder risk assessment, a sort of 360, and we're all standing around this risk and expressing our subjective assessment of it, put those things together and we'll get a well-rounded view of what the risk is really like. So I think it's always going to be subjective. That's not a bad thing. We need to recognize it. The subjectivity scopes our uncertainty, but then we have a view from everybody that we can put together to get a slightly more rounded view of the risk. It will never be precise. It could be accurate, but it won't be precise because we're talking about uncertainty.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Yeah, perfect sense. I'm going to take this opportunity to welcome Martin back, but I'm just going to read out this final message that has come from Sarah. Excellent presentation. Can't wait to share this with my colleagues as risk is still viewed as negative. Also, how we need to take personal responsibility for risk that affects our objectives. Brilliant presentation. Thank you. And I think that really does sum up today's event and the knowledge that you've shared. And from me personally and the APM, I'd like to say thank you, but I'll pass over to Martin to also extend his thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, David. Once again, I think you're one of the best risk speakers I've ever listened to. You've explained it so clearly, so succinctly, so neatly that no one can actually fail to understand the points you're actually making. So, as usual, a fantastic presentation on that. Some takeaways from me, I think. As a project manager, I hate surprises. And risk management is about managing surprises, be they good surprises as regards opportunities or nasty surprises as regards threats. It's how you approach that. And if you approach it from you don't like being surprised, I think that what David does with the six perspective, it just summarizes what you need to do to make sure you don't get that nasty surprise coming through the door at 5:30 on the Friday afternoon. No one likes those, and so risk management is a fantastic opportunity to help you manage those nasty surprises and making sure you have foresight. If you have foresight, you can then be forewarned. You can then manage and plan and deal with stuff as it comes to the door, because stuff will come to the door. Things go wrong in life. That's just a fact of life, as David has said quite clearly. And the other key thing for me as well is that risk management is not a solo effort. It is a team effort. If all your stakeholders are involved in your risk management process, you will then build up a common view of the risks and opportunities and what you're going to do about them. Again, stakeholders don't like having surprises, particularly if they're funding things or the impacts on other projects, and if you're dealing with a program and things like that. So involving your stakeholders, involving your team, making sure you all have a common view. You may not have a complete agreement about that, doesn't matter, but you have a common view and you've reached that view together, and that's really important as well. So David, once again, thank you very, very much indeed. A real pleasure listening to you, it really is. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for everyone joining us, and hope you have a very good evening.
Keep well, everyone.
Thank you very much as usual. Okay.
Bye for now.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.